This week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
That's a good question. Where does it stop? And as we know with the left, it never stops because of their mental illnesses. Plural, that's plural. That's not singular. It's not just one mental illness. There are a great many mental illnesses. They're very upset at the New York Times. The New York Times is upset. Trump administration to reinstall Albert Pike, Confederate statue in D.C. That's the headline at the New York Times. Albert Pike was a Confederate general and diplomat who negotiated alliances with slave-owning Native American tribes during the Civil War. Native Americans, the tribes, they owned slaves, and he was negotiating with them? What was he negotiating? Well, anyway, the Democrats vandalized the statue in Washington, D.C. and tore it down and half demolished the plinth. It's a plinth. Who doesn't use the word plinth in everyday conversation? You know, the big stone stand on which the statue was placed long ago, more than a century ago. But the Democrats vandalized it because George Floyd, a career criminal who died while resisting arrest yet again for yet another felony, passing counterfeit bills to a poor little immigrant man just trying to make his way in the world and run his business, when the career criminal and drug addict junkie with fentanyl and methamphetamine coursing through his veins decided to go in and try to pass a counterfeit $20 bill. And the little immigrant man who owned the store, he recognized that the criminal junkie was trying to steal from him, called the police, and then the hero of the Democrat Party resisted arrest until he went into cardiac arrest, and then he died. And so the Democrats murdered everybody around and sent the police officer to prison, where another Democrat stabbed the police officer 22 times. What was that police officer's name? Was that? Derek Chauvin is the correct answer. Very good. That's right. Yeah, and the New York Times, they're very upset. The Trump administration will restore and reinstall the only statue that had honored a Confederate official in the U.S. Capitol after demonstrators, not violent rioters or a violent mob of Democrat criminals, but demonstrators, toppled it and set it on fire. They love setting things on fire. You see, they're going to fight fire with fire now with the Texas redistricting thing, because you can't do what Democrats have been doing for years and years, or they're going to set the place on fire. They might firebomb some Jewish governor's house, maybe go terrorize Jewish students on Ivy League campuses. You know, they're the Democrat Party. You know, they are, aren't they? And by the way, the Confederacy was the Democrat Party as well. The president of the Confederacy, as any child of six can tell you, was who? Who was it? Jefferson Davis, that's right. And what was his political party? Democrat. He was a Democrat. And his opponent up north was, who was his opponent? Abraham Lincoln. And what was his party? Republican. See, and what happened to him? He got shot in the head by a Democrat and murdered, didn't he? Because the history of the Democrat Party is a violent history. It's a tortured history. It's a kidnap. They're like ISIS. The Democrat Party. They should probably be banned. And they steal every chance they get, and they loot, and they burn, they plunder and pillage. They're like the Vikings, but in the age of the internet, which makes it different. I think the defaced statue depicts Albert Pike, a Confederate diplomat. Now, he's a diplomat and general who worked closely with Native Americans from slave-owning tribes that sided with the Confederacy during the Civil War. Maybe we don't want to change the name back to the Redskins. Maybe the Redskins, because we don't want slave-owning Redskins. Is it named for slave-owning Redskins? Is that because I'm not sure. If the Democrats had a chance to name it the first time around, then maybe it did. The defaced statue depicts Albert Pike, Confederate diplomat in general, who worked closely with Native Americans from slave-owning tribes that sided with the Confederacy, probably geography more than anything, during the Civil War, But wait a minute, in the 1860s, the Native Americans were owning slaves because, they always owned slaves. Long before the Europeans got here, they had slaves. And sex slaves and work slaves and house slaves, field slaves. They had all that kind of stuff going on, the Native Americans. But that's okay because they're not entirely white. So the Democrats they're with them, kind of like them being with Hamas. So pretty amazing. And fought to protect slavery as an institution. He was also a prominent leader of the Freemasons, which is the primary focus of the monument, I believe. A secretive fraternal society. They, in the New York Times, they hate secretive unless it's their own non-disclosure agreements, of which they have entered into many. Fraternal, what fraternal, that's too male-oriented. That reeks of toxic masculinity, doesn't it? And a society, they're anti-society, too. So they don't like anything about a secretive fraternal society. That included many powerful politicians and elite figures in the 18th and 19th centuries. The bronze 11-foot-tall statue of Mr. Pike, which had been in storage since it was toppled from its perch near the Capitol grounds 5 years ago by the American Taliban, the violent, long-haired, smelly. They've got a lot in common with the Taliban. Their odoriferous odors, their grooming habits, what do you call it? Sexually transmitted diseases, STDs or STIs. STD, STI. The Democrats, they have two different abbreviations for their sexually transmitted diseases. They like monkeypox best these days. It was approved by Congress in 1898 and built by an order of Freemasons, not even paid for by the tax dollars. The monument's inscriptions do not directly mention Mr. Pike's ties to the Confederacy, and the statue itself depicts him as a leader to the Freemasons. Inscriptions on the monument laud Pike as a poet, a scholar, a soldier, an orator, a jurist, and a philanthropist. Well, naturally, the Democrats had to tear that down and violently attack it and smash the foundation and the base. And the announcement by the National Park Service on Monday was the latest component of President Trump's sweeping effort to restore Confederate symbols in the military and in public spaces. That's a lie. That's a New York Times lie. That's not true. There is no sweeping effort by Trump to restore Confederate symbols. That's a lie. However, the New York Times supported slavery and the Nazis, but pay no attention to that. They're just the New York Times. Earlier this year, Mr. Trump directed the military to restore the names of all Army bases that had been named for Confederate generals. That's a lie. That's a lie. It's a deception, misdirection. All Army bases that had been named for Confederate generals, of all Army bases that had been named for Confederate generals, and signed an executive order calling for the restoration of public monuments that were removed during the racial justice protests that followed the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer who was stabbed 22 times by a Democrat after the Democrats threw him in prison for trying to control a violent, drug-crazed career criminal named George Floyd, who naturally became a hero of the Democrat Party. I know he's dead, but the Democrats should really run him for Congress. Maybe in Texas. Maybe in Texas they should run for Congress. Now, here's the truth, because the New York Times they have the scruples of street prostitutes, and I mean no offense to street prostitutes who may have scruples well beyond those practiced at the New York Times. But this is amazing. So to restore the names of Army bases that had been named for Confederate generals. No, Fort Bragg, for example, had been named for a Confederate. The Democrats renamed it because Joe Biden, first of all, the Confederate, the Confederacy, the Confederate States of America, that's the Democrat Party. Their president, Jefferson Davis, was a Democrat, and the whole Democrat Party was the Confederacy. And President Trump said, listen, like 3 million Americans went through Fort Bragg, probably more of that. Remember fondly Fort Bragg, home of the airborne and all this great stuff. And they said, let's call it Camp Lilybell instead. And it'd be Fort Lilybell because camp is Marine Corps. But the Fort Bragg U.S. Army installation. It's in North Carolina, the largest military bases in the world, and it's great and wonderful. And then the Democrats, they renamed it, and President Trump said, let's because a lot of soldiers came to him and said, what the Democrats have done again is burning our history, the history of the United States of America, and said, okay, well, let's find, because surely in World War II we had put 16.5 million men in uniform take up arms against the Socialist Workers' Party of Adolf Hitler and the Empire of Japan. My father went when called and went and killed some Germans, then killed some Japanese, because, what else he's going to do? And so that happened. And then the Democrats said, let's rename everything because we're the Taliban and we're going to change the name of everything American. And President Trump said, well, let's find somebody else named Bragg, same last name, and we can rename Fort Bragg back to Fort Bragg, which is what the Democrats should have done in the first place. But they're stupid, ignorant, anti-American, violent, love firebombing things, hate the Jews, hate America. They're not on the side of civilization. But Fort Bragg, one of the most famous U.S. military bases ever, of course. But February of 2025, the U.S. Army changed the name of the installation back to Fort Bragg, but this time in honor of a World War II paratrooper named Roland L. Bragg. Roland L. Bragg, because the Democrats had stripped the name off of it. And then the Democrats at the New York Times, they lie because they lie in every paragraph that Trump decided to change the names of bases back to their Confederate soldiers. And then you got a Freemason monument in Washington, and I guess he was also part of the Confederate States of America. And therefore, the Democrats are right to Taliban it, to tear it down, to vandalize it, to destroy it. And you know what? Nobody was held accountable. Nobody was arrested. Nobody. It's not like January 6th, where 10,000 people got 100 years in jail each. No, nobody got a single day in jail. There was no punishment for any of that. Isn't that amazing? You guys, your Democrat Party. Because in January of 2021, what happened in January of 2021? Oh, wait a minute. That's when Joe Biden took over as communist president. And the amazing stuff, they passed a law, the Democrats, to rename the renaming commission. It was called the Taliban Commission on this radio show. And they need to rename anything that was named for Confederate officials. And look, I can even see having a discussion about that. But how ironic is it that the party of the Confederacy, the Democrat Party, they're the ones leading the charge, pretending like they're noble, and they jut their chins out and stand proud, chests pushed forward with breast implants because they were just chest feeding at home somebody else's baby. They're quite bizarre people. And they said, we're going to change the name of all the bases, right? And we're gonna rename it Fort Liberty because they're the anti-liberty people. So, and they understand nothing about irony. So, hey, we're going to change the name to Fort Liberty. And then President Trump said, let's find a World War II soldier named Bragg, and we'll rename it Bragg again. And now the Democrats at the New York Times are furious, and they're lying that Trump wanted to rename the bases, call them what they've always been called. That if your father served in the Vietnam War, your grandfather in the Korean War, your great-grandfather in World War II, maybe closer than that, then, they may have served at Fort Bragg. And they got plaques at home, and they got certificates in frames. They served it and the Democrats said, screw that. Come on, I served at cross-dressing school at the kindergarten. Because that's what they do. So the person in question here, Pike, a scholar, a poet, an orator, a jurist, a philanthropist, and a soldier, a monument put up by the Freemasons with an extraordinary American history, and the Democrats want to tear down everything in the country. Speaking of which, they're threatening to set fires again because in Texas, they're daring to suggest that they might do what Democrats do all over the country all the time. And I'll explain that coming up next. We're at 888-630-9625. Chris here with a list of things that none of us should trust. The Washington Post, the New York Times, anything on CNN. Here's a list of things that I do trust. The Washington Times. Support real journalism for just $1 a week at washingtontimes.com/Chris. All right, and we have another probe. You know how Washington loves a large, ever-expanding probe. Sometimes well-lubricated, sometimes not. But another one coming because of Russiagate and Democrat criminals everywhere in the machine. Right now, let's go to the telephones, Michael, because the huge story of the day is out of Texas, and the Democrats may be creating a new Confederate States of America. All the lies they tell, the gerrymandering they do. Let's go to Eric, calling from the great Republic of Texas. Eric, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, I think it's thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. You have a wonderful show. I love it, and I just enjoy it so much. And I was watching all these Democrats on TV cry and complain how the Republicans in Texas are gerrymandering and that they should do the same thing. And I was thinking, you know what? That's a great idea, because all around me I'm seeing license plates from Illinois, California. I couldn't believe it. I saw some Delaware. I couldn't believe it. I thought, what are you doing down here? And I was thinking, you know what? I think all the Democrats are coming down here trying to dilute our state. I think that's a great idea, because I think they're going to realize that a lot of Democrats are shifting to become Republicans in those blue states. So I think what they're going to do, they're going to hurt themselves because they're not thinking. They're going to hurt themselves because the blue states are going to become pink and then soon to be red, because when these tariffs, as they're kicking in, and people are waking up to realize that the Democrats have done nothing but hurt and harm them in their future, they're going to switch. They're going to jump ship. They're going to leave willingly. And they're going to find themselves out of being represented by a bunch of idiots, a bunch of children, that all they do is cry and scream, Orange man bad, Trump bad. So I do hope everybody in those states, Illinois, Delaware, California, redistrict, redraw your lines, because you're going to find you're going to be woken up to something that's probably going to surprise you.
I like your thinking. I've been sitting here nodding in agreement and kind of a little bit of a smirk, and I love the way you laid it out, Eric. You did a great job. Now, I'm very sorry to hear that you're seeing a lot of tags from Illinois and California. Are you around Austin?
No, I'm out west in Lubbock, the big great red wall. But one thing's for certain, when they come down here, they realize they can't flip us. There's too many Republicans, and you know what? Our way of life is so freeing that they're naturally becoming Republicans.
I hope they don't start looting. All right, now, Greg Abbott, who, what does that trampy street girl call him? Hot Wheels, Democrat Congresswoman, for whom I have the utmost respect, or at least as much respect as she deserves. And that's very, very little. Texas Congresswoman, she ought to be gassed, really. She should be... kind of in an official way. We've got they're going crazy because Texas is talking about redistricting, and by redistricting in Texas, it's possible that Republicans could gain as many as 5 seats in the House of Representatives. And the Democrats are furious about this, and the media is lying to you about it, because it turns out the media lies about pretty much everything at this point. They love Democrats, and the tongue bath for the Democrat Party, that's one of their specialties. Jasmine Crockett is out there calling President Trump a piece of beep because she's keeping it classy, like the street tramp that she is, and a revered Democrat member of the House of Representatives, dragging us down to third world levels. And like so many of the Democrats, but Jasmine Crockett is, no, you look at a still picture of her and you think, oh, nice looking lady, a pretty woman. And then she starts talking and you think, man, look, America can take, the lady out of the third world, but can't take the third world out of the lady. And she's not keeping it classy, let's say, calling a piece of beep. And then she's calling him Hitler, but she's got a new update on Hitler. What's the name of the online? Temu. She calls him Tamu or Temu. It's one of these online things where you buy inexpensive stuff, or you buy stuff inexpensively, whichever way you like it. I went to it this morning and said, oh, they got some really good prices, nice things at a fair price. It's almost like Bob's Big Boy. But I looked at that this morning because the Congresswoman is calling President Trump a Temu Hitler. Temu is, again, online inexpensive shopping site. Temu, like a low-budget Hitler. And it's always the Hitler thing. And then she got back to killing 1 million babies a year and terrorizing the Jews on campuses and firebombing Jewish governors' houses while calling everybody Nazis and Hitler. No sense of irony, these people. We got that Mo Yarborough on MSDNC prattling on about what's going on in Texas. And let's keep in mind what the Democrats have already done across the country, because they've done this in state after state after state. There is an amazing story I want to share with you out of Massachusetts, where the Democrats have ruled. And what do they call it when they've got all three? They've got the state house, the state senate, and the governor's mansion. And it's the hat trick. And then they can steal everything there is to steal. And the Democrats have been doing that in California and Illinois and Massachusetts and Maryland. They've been doing it all over the country. And the media pretends none of this is known. None of this has happened, because the news media is the filthiest, most corrupt gang of miscreants in the United States of America. It's not just the Democrats in Congress. It's also their media bootlicks, the bootlicks. That's as polite as you can be when it comes to the media people here. But let's go. In fact, let me do this right now, because I went to do research on this and pulled together a bunch of stories. Now, the people at Boston 25 TV in Boston, Massachusetts, a hotbed of left-wing liberal radicals, and they got Elizabeth Warren, who's a fake Native American. I think she opened a casino, didn't she? She opened a casino. And now I think I'll have me a beer. She couldn't be a bigger phony if she set out to become a bigger phony. If they had classes at Harvard and being a bigger phony, she could teach it. She wouldn't have to take it. But the people at News 25 in Boston, Massachusetts, after the election last year where President Trump won re-election, his second time, November 7th of 2024, the headline is full list of mass towns Donald Trump won on way to presidential victory over Kamala Harris. All right. This will just provide a little context that everyone should have at their fingertips. Even though Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris handily defeated Republican Donald Trump by about 40,000 votes in Massachusetts, the former president did claim victory in dozens of local communities on his way to winning the 2024 presidential election. That's what they said. Updated election results show Harris earned 61.3% of the vote in Massachusetts to President-elect Trump's 36.5%, with 98% of the votes counted as of Thursday morning, according to the Associated Press data. Now, let me just pause there for a second. So in Massachusetts, Kamala Harris won 61% of the vote, and Donald Trump won 36.5% of the vote. So if you're going to round it, you'd say 60-40, but it's a shade off of that, a little better for Harris, a little worse for Trump than 60-40, but 36.5 to 61.3. All right? Despite Harris's unsurprising win in the Bay State, hotbed of left-wing lunacy, crime, illegal aliens, all that stuff, Trump was a popular pick among Bay Staters in large chunks of Hamden, Worcester, Plymouth, Bristol counties, voting results indicated. Now, the remarkable thing about this is that President Trump won, you could say, nearly 40% of the vote in the presidential election, and lots and lots of stuff. But interestingly, the 79 towns and cities in Massachusetts won by Trump, and the split in the vote is roughly 60-40, right? Now, then I said to myself, well, wait a minute, how many House seats, seats in the House of Representatives here in Washington, D.C., does Massachusetts have, and how many of those go to Republicans, and how many of them go to Democrats? And it turns out, interestingly enough, it turns out that there are a total of 9 seats in Massachusetts for the House of Representatives. And so I went and I looked at that at house.gov/representatives #state and on it goes. And I went to Massachusetts, and it turns out I went and I counted them. And they've got the names of the Massachusetts members of the House, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they have 9 districts from the 1st district through the 9th district, 9 districts, and every one of those goes to a Democrat. Wait a minute. Trump won 40% of the vote in Massachusetts in the presidential election, but you see, the Democrats have dominance in Massachusetts. They control the state house, the state senate, and the governor's mansion, as they normally, if not always, do. And so they, you know what they did? They gerrymandered. And although 40% of the state, approximately, votes Republican, and not just Republican, but Trump, there are a lot of Republicans that don't vote Trump. So it's probably higher than that in other election years, more than 40%. So call it a 60-40 split. They have 9 House seats. 0 of those House seats went to a Republican candidate. How can that be? Well, the answer is simple. Democrats are corrupt, and Democrats gerrymandered the state to death long ago, and they murdered democracy. They destroyed democracy. They firebombed it like they did the Jewish governor's mansion in Pennsylvania. And where else have they done that? I talked about this yesterday in the state of Illinois. I'm still at house.gov/representatives with all the various other accoutrements. And in Illinois, gosh, they've got a whole lot of districts in Illinois. They have 17 House seats. And, of course, both Senate seats, obviously, in Massachusetts go to left-wing radical Democrats who hate America and the Jews. And in Illinois, they have 17 House seats, 17 House seats. And I said, well, how many of those go to Republicans? 17 House seats in Illinois, 3 of them go to Republicans. You got 3 Republicans, and then you have 14 Democrats. And interestingly enough, Illinois lost population in the last census because so many people are fleeing Illinois because the Democrats want to steal everything you have and sever your children's genitalia and put the genitalia in a mayonnaise jar on Funk and Wagnall's front porch from noon today. Isn't that amazing? And when the census came out, the Democrats said, let's gerrymander the hell out of this. And they said, it turns out that when the Democrats started, the Republicans had 5 safe seats in Illinois. And the Democrats had whatever the number was before that. I have to go look it up from yesterday's story. I know in misstate, I think they had 13 states and the 13 House seats, rather, and the Republicans had 5. And then the Democrats gerrymandered, and the Republicans suddenly had 3 seats. And somehow, even though the state lost population, the Democrats in charge, and the Speaker of the House, by the way, is incredibly corrupt, Mike Madigan, and he's been there forever, for like 50 years. He's 80 years old or something, and he's been a Democrat power broker in Springfield, the capital of Illinois, for a long, long time. And Mike Madigan, earlier this year, was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison for corruption, which is perfectly normal in Illinois. Their governors are sent to prison, their House speakers sent, and they're all Democrats and sent to prison because of the corruption. And Illinois gerrymandered the hell out of this, and they tried to squeeze every Republican seat out. But the Republicans went from 5 seats in the House to 3 because the Democrats chopped up the districts. And even though they lost population, the Democrats increased the number of seats they had while decreasing the number of seats the Republicans had. And that's perfectly normal. In California, the Republican governor at the time, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's Austrian and not German. And he was the governor, and he cut a deal with the Democrats and said, look, when we do redistricting in the future, let's do it in a bipartisan way. It can't be done just by one party. Let's stop doing that stupidity. And everybody agreed because Arnold Schwarzenegger initiated it as a Republican. Now, the Democrats have blown that up. They burned that to the ground because they don't believe in fairness. They believe in power. They believe in winning. And, you know, they have sayings like, by any means necessary. That's the Democrat Party. Remember, that's the Democrat Party. Isn't it amazing? Your Democrat Party, they're not on the side of being American. They're not on the side of the good guys. They're just not the good guys. Am I right? Yes, I am. All right, so we got that. Now, with that said, what they're really upset about, and the entirety of the news media, and they're all lying about it, and there are lies of omission and there are lies of commission. They're committing lies, and then there's a lot they're not telling you. And Greg Abbott can come out all he wants and say, listen, the Democrats have been doing this for decades now, locking in all the states where they have the big three. They have the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion, and they corrupt the hell out of it. Senator Tom Cotton is an all-around good guy, a regular guy. He went to Harvard Law School, even though he's not a fancy pants from Boston, Mass. And then when he became a lawyer out of Harvard, he said, I think I'm going to join the Army. And he joined the Army after Harvard Law School. Who does that? And there's a war going on, for America and against terrorism. So he joined the Army. And they said, well, you went to Harvard Law School. We need to be an Army lawyer. You need to be a JAG officer, as they call them, the Judge Advocate General Office. And he said, no, I want to be a combat soldier. I want a rifle. I want to lead men in combat. So he did that. Senator Tom Cotton talking about the Democrats fleeing Texas, by the way, aboard a private jet to fly up to Illinois to meet with a billionaire, the governor, Democrat governor there, J.B. Pritzker. So they take a private jet. Who paid for that? The Democrats fly out of Texas. They go to Illinois, where they sit down with the Democrat governor, who's an inherited billionaire, didn't earn anything himself. His code name is Circumference, and Senator Tom Cotton.
I find it deeply ironic that Democrats are fleeing Texas over gerrymandering to New York and Massachusetts and Illinois. New York just tried to do a mid-decade redistricting. Massachusetts has a horrible gerrymander. Republicans there typically get 35 to 40% of the vote, sometimes even more. They don't have a single member of Congress.
They don't have a single member of Congress. How can that be? But President Trump, when almost 40% of Massachusetts, and they don't have a single member from Massachusetts in the House of Representatives because the Democrats, and go look at the lines of the districts that the Democrats drew, Tom Cotton.
Illinois' congressional map, I would compare to the scribblings of a small child, but it would be unfair to small children. It is a horrific gerrymander.
It is a horrific gerrymander, and it certainly is. Now, if we had a news media, that would be the starting point of the story. They'd almost be laughing as though it's a snarky story to tell. How absurd it is for the Democrats, but they're all Democrats in the media lying to us about everything. They're cheating on their wives. They're cheating on their taxes. They're lying to their neighbors. They lie about everything. And the gerrymandering that Texas is talking about is modeled on what the Democrats have been doing in Democrat state after Democrat state for Democrat decade after Democrat decade. And how do you think they own the House of Representatives and mostly the House for so long? It's because they're happy to be corrupt by hook or by crook, by hammer and sickle. Here come the Democrats. All right. Now, I have so many amazing stories to tell. Here's a great one I made passing mention. Texas, this is the Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom. It's not in the Washington Post. It's not in the New York Times. CNN is not talking about it because lies of omission are just as good as lies of commission, and they know it. Texas Democrat lawmakers flee. They put the word flee in the headline in all capital letters. Flee the state on private jet in aberrant stunt to seize power. That's the Daily Mail. Texas Democrats are being slammed over a wild stunt, right? And their antics in an attempt to stop redistricting legislation that favors Republicans. Over 50 Democratic state lawmakers fled the state over the weekend to avoid voting on a controversial Donald Trump-backed piece of legislation that could help Republicans get more power in Congress. They hope to, they jumped on it says a $17,000 an hour private jet on Sunday, earning the wrath of conservatives who accuse them of spending an estimated $100,000 total to charter the airplane to flee the state so they don't have to do their job that they were elected to do and go to Illinois to hang out with the Democrat governor there, Circumference, who inherited billions from his grandfather, who started the Hyatt hotel chain, and he's never really done anything. And then he bought the governor's mansion in Illinois, and he lives there where, I don't know if he eats for free or not, but he eats. And the Democrats, they took a private jet from Texas, so they didn't have to do their work that they were elected by the people to do, not debate anything, just flee like little girls with their hair on fire, and going to Illinois, which has gerrymandered the congressional districts to death that I just talked about a couple of minutes ago. And how about Maryland? Because we're talking about Texas, Illinois, Massachusetts, where Trump got nearly 40% of the vote, and Republicans have 0 seats in the House of Representatives in Massachusetts because the way the Democrats gerrymandered it long ago. The Washington Post and the New York Times are not going to tell you that.